Mr. Joe Brunsman, how you doing today, sir?
Living the dream. I get to do insurance, man. It's all good.
Well, that's certainly all you can ask for, Joe. We'll hopefully keep you living the dream for a while here. But before we get anything too serious, I want to know this. What's a nice gesture that you would maybe just prefer somebody didn't do?
Ooh, a nice gesture that somebody wouldn't do.
That you would prefer that they didn't do for you?
Man, I would probably say, in my line of work, like being nice, and I always have this thought, I'm like, do people actually understand when I'm talking about kind of relatively complex principles? Or are they just like being nice and saying like, "Oh, okay, yeah, I get it." Right? Because for me, I'm like, well, I don't really care if you don't understand. Like, tell me, and I'll put that statement in a different fashion. Right? So maybe like that would be the nice thing, is like being nice and pretending to understand a concept. But I'm like, no, I really want you to get it, not just be
Yeah,
nice.
I think 100% that's you run into quite a bit of that, I would imagine. But for me, Joe, it's I would prefer if somebody didn't pick up the check at a restaurant. I like to order a lot of food. I feel bad about it. I don't want to take my massive food bill and have you take it. I feel bad because then I order less food, then I'm hungry, then nobody really wins in that scenario. And I don't want to say like I'm going to order more food. Granted, it's generally a nice thing, but it's probably something I need to work on, maybe more so than somebody else. But Joe, you took me already into a spot kind of where I wanted to talk to you about in terms of the conversations that you have, and again, maybe the politeness that does happen around the insurance conversation. Maybe let's dive back in a little bit more of how do you guess I guess do you feel like you are conscious of when somebody is just sort of giving you lip service of like, yeah, I think I know what's going on here, but they have no idea, and how do you get around it if you feel like they maybe need a little more understanding but aren't really willing to own up to it?
Man, that's hard because obviously for me, if I say something, it makes sense to me in terms of trying to relay that to other people. Obviously, in person is going to be the best in terms of judgment there. Second best is like over a video. Over the phone, it's kind of a crapshoot, right? So I generally try to tell people, hey, I'm going to ask you seemingly kind of basic, stupid questions about your business. And then I can just ask them whatever I want. And then in return, I go, okay, now it's your turn, right? Like you're a subject matter expert in your business. I'm ideally a subject matter expert in what I do, or at least I try to be. And so, hey, it's all fair, right? No stupid questions. If you don't get something, just tell me and I'll word it a different way or dive deeper down the rabbit hole.
And are you often surprised at the level of questions that are coming back at you? Like where do you generally rank the average knowledge base of the clients you're dealing with, and how much do you either underestimate or overestimate, that conversation and what they may or may not know?
Ooh, I'd say generally, I think, I mean, to be fair, it's like you don't really know that much about things you just don't deal with all the time. It's like I'd like to think I know everything I possibly can about what I do, but obviously there's always going to be some, continuous learning going on there. And I'm always trying to figure out what I don't know. But, as far as like clients go, it's entirely understandable, right? That they just don't know this stuff. Things that to us are blatantly apparent because we do it all day, every day. To them, they'd have no idea. So like if you came to me and you're a master woodworker, right? To you, you're just going to know offhand, like, all right, well, if I'm trying to build this thing, then I'm going to use this type of wood or this type of wood or this type of wood. I would obviously never use this other type of wood for a myriad of reasons. But to me, a layperson in that field, like I would have zero clue and it would take me a long time to get there. And I'd probably break a bunch of stuff until I did.
So I want to take this in two different directions. One being from the conversations you have generally, if I remember correctly from last time we talked, a lot around cyber and sort of the professional line space of the insurance world. Is that still
Mhm.
correct?
Oh yeah. Yeah. And I will readily admit to people, I don't know the first thing about many, many types of insurance, right? So like auto insurance, I don't know, man. I got USAA. It's worked so well, you know, by this point that I don't really have the brain space for it.
Yeah. So I guess the first part of that is I feel like there's a lot of agents that would like to have more educated conversations with their clients in that area, and they're, maybe,
Hmm.
for whatever reason, they haven't gotten to it. They're not picking up the right clients. They're just not having the conversations maybe they want to have. They're not figuring out a way in. So I guess to those folks, what would you say, like, how do you level up that conversation? Because I do think you know quite a bit more than the average bear for sure. Like, what's the secret? What's the way to sort of start to slowly increase that conversation IQ with clients, and maybe just finding better clients in general for those conversations?
Ooh, damn, that's a good question. I'd say foremost, it starts like with the insurance guy. It's like, hey, you need to take that onus to go, you know what? In my free time, I am gonna read insurance law, right? Like I'm gonna figure that out. And then I would say from there, right, once you start building up this deep base of knowledge, and obviously it just takes time, right? Which is something that probably nobody wants to hear. Everybody wants to make $1 million this year, but it's like this stuff, it just takes time to get to that point. And it's a lot of, learning about stuff that's maybe outside your wheelhouse, outside your area of expertise, diving deeper into subjects, asking the question, why do we say XYZ, right? So, for example, why are we recommending $1 million in coverage for a cyber policy for some SMB is like kind of the ground floor? Like, why are we saying that? Right. And then you break it down into component parts. And then I would say, if you think of yourself as more of a teacher, like if you can teach something, then you really understand it. So, like me personally, I like to break everything into frameworks. So somebody will ask me a question and I'll say, okay, there's really kind of two answers to that, right? There's the simple answer and then there's the deeper answer. So somebody like, an SMB goes, well, how much cyber insurance do I need? Right. And I'm like, well, the simple answer is you're probably going to need $1 million, right, in coverage. That's kind of answer one. Now, the deeper answer there is let's talk about, okay, what is cyber insurance, right? Two sides, four buckets, exclusions, right? Now let's talk about what are the various elements within your business? What are the various stakeholders within your business particularly concerned about, right? It's like the CFO is way more interested in like cybercrime, social engineering, because that's the kind of disaster scenario on the top of their mind. Whereas, maybe your CISO, CTO, CIO, they're more worried about the technical side of it. The CEO is more worried about, say, like the reputational harm, PR considerations within the business. And then you can kind of start breaking that down into just all the little parts. And then you go from there. So, yeah, I'd say learn about it, learn how to teach it, even if it's like just to your fellow agents in the office, right? So you could get a lot of good feedback there. And then just build frameworks within conversations so that you can organize your thoughts. And then that'll lead to a lot of those deeper discussions that I think can really, one, demonstrate the expertise that the insurance folks have ideally built up. But then two, it ultimately just adds a lot more value to the client, because then they can start saying, oh, well, maybe I don't know what the CFO wants. I don't know what their internal controls are. And then it just makes everything better at the end of the day.
Well, I think one of the more interesting aspects of that is knowing your audience, right? And not talking the same to everybody in the company and assuming they have the same concerns about the coverage. And
Yes.
this is kind of maybe leading into the second part of why I wanted to go to in terms of talking to somebody that, is similar level with you, does this stuff all day, every day. Like, this is the only, they live, sleep, and breathe sort of this type of coverage. How you start to think about it once you sort of level up to that, and maybe some of the nuances that you've sort of picked up along the way recently that seem to be making an impact, and even, I guess, to a lesser extent, how you continue down that path of specialized conversations within the company, and how that has, this is a big question, sorry, Joe, but we're going to go with it. But and
Mm-hmm.
how you've had opportunities to sort of sell everybody in the company in a different way on the coverages that you're recommending.
So, generally I'm going to have a point of contact. Often that could be, the operations officer or the chief financial officer or something like that. But what I like to really kind of tell them is, hey, I can talk to you about what your concerns are, but we need buy-in from everybody else to make sure that if we don't have the right coverage for some specific event, or it's not enough, or it's not the right type, that it's not your butt in the hot seat and everybody's pointing at you going, why didn't you do XYZ? Why didn't you get this thing that I never told you about and you'd really have no reason to know about because that's, like in a different area of the business. And so I like to, talk to my points of contact at these businesses and go, hey, yeah, even if you are the CEO, your CFO is going to have specific concerns. All these different department heads are going to have their own particular concerns. So if nothing else, as a CYA, just send out an email and say, hey, we're buying cyber insurance, we're buying E&O insurance. What particular concerns are you most worried about? And then that also helps me on the other end because then I can start addressing those, right? So it can be, hey, coverage would be afforded here for XYZ reason, or that coverage just doesn't exist, right? So you need to go back to that person and tell them maybe it's an internal controls issue or it's a enhanced technology issue that they'd have to deal with. It gets everybody on the same page. And I find that to be pretty useful. I also, one thing I think is highly undervalued is I make a lot of videos. And so, let's say I have a big new client, right? I will do my best to try and condense all that down in just to like a quick 10-minute video, right? And I'll say, okay, this is what you got. These are the big ticket items you need to worry about, right? So that way my point of contact can then spread that to everybody else. And then I'm always looking for additional questions.
The interesting there is that they basically then give them the ability to review that information at their leisure, right? Like you're giving them their time back to sort of, it's not sort of forcing them to do it when you need to. One, I want to know, has that really been sort of game changing? And before you said that, I was kind of going to ask, I guess I still want to know, is like, getting buy-in from the whole company, sort of from the high stakeholders. Do you explicitly go around and set appointments like to talk with these folks, or do you try to distribute that information in different ways so it is a little bit easier and not as time consuming?
I found that video is the easiest way to digest generally complex information and to be able to speak about it like a human. I skipped a whole lot of school growing up. Despite the fact I ended up writing books, sitting down and writing an email that's like 5 pages long. I hate reading that. I'm sure you hate reading that. Nobody wants to do that. And so just a quick video link of, hey, for the next, 5 to 7 minutes, whatever, here's Joe talking about insurance, things that everybody needs to know, asking questions, et cetera, trying to get feedback. That I've found is infinitely more digestible than the big, long, giant email. And then also, I feel like it's a lot easier to speak about things, at least for me, than it is to try and sit down and type out every possible variation of a scenario and how that could, play out. So often what will happen is I'll make a video and then that kind of spurs like a conference call of sorts, right? Where it's just kind of me in the hot seat and I'm like, hey, ask me anything you want. If I don't know, I'll tell you. But if I do know, I'm going to tell you that too.
Yeah, I was kind of curious, like, what was the next step? Like, as those questions come back and everything, and it sounds like everybody jumps on a call and it kind of is hashed out. Did you notice a switch? I guess when you first started going down the video path versus, again, using a traditional, too long to read email, did that click with you? Was there a moment where you said, oh, wow, this is really it? Or did something just that started like gradually sort of creeping into sort of your process?
The short answer was, or is, I should say, I started making videos because I was lazy and tired. So let me explain that. At the time, I had 2 very small sons. Some nights I would get, 4 hours of sleep, and some nights I would get 8 hours of sleep. It just kind of, every parent can kind of relate to that. And so, a lot of it was I just kept getting the same questions over and over again. And I think a lot of insurance folks can probably relate to that. And so I was like, hey, why don't I just sit down and make a video and try and bring all the different areas that I think I can add value together, right, in a way that's kind of laid out with a framework. So I can hit that question from multiple angles to try and give the business owner the best possible answer or the best possible solutions to that question. And then that kind of grew a life of its own. Like I never really had this genius master plan that I was going to make videos and do all these things and, grow my business, XYZ. It didn't really turn out that way. It was just dumb luck and happenstance. And then once I started doing it and I got a lot of good feedback and people were going, hey, man, thanks. That was great. Well, I'll just do more of that because it's way easier to, after I should add to get to that point where you can speak right in with authority over a video, there is a lot of work in the background that you need to do, right? So like please don't think that you can just hop on a video, it's going to solve all your concerns. It's like no, you need to do the, unfortunately, I hate to say it, but like the thousands of hours alone. Nobody cares about you. No one's going to guide you. You just got to figure all that stuff out. So that way you can hop on a 5-minute video and just sit here and talk, right? And say, hey, this is what I think the answer to your question is. These are things you need to know about, and then go from there.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that because I definitely wanted to get to that and maybe dive in a little bit more. But the other thing too is, did you ever run into the issue as you sort of started to climb the ladder of the executive that you're sending a video to? I could hear agents saying this, like, "Oh, they don't have the time; they're not going to watch this. Like, I need to send them, even if it's not a long email, a short email." Like, was there any pushback? Did you ever question or doubt yourself, or are you finding it to be the exact opposite?
No, I think it's the opposite. I think people are, because you could pull up my video on your phone through your email, right? So I've had business owners come back to me and they go, hey man, I've watched every single one of your videos. I listened to you on my way to work.
Hmm.
And I'm like, oh, cool. Right. Or, it's, hey, on the way home, they just pop it on their phone, goes to their speakers in their car, and they just listen to what I'm saying. Right. So I feel like it's so much easier and more digestible for really even the average executive, right? Where they could just sit and, and you get that personal component to it, right? Like I'm not just a guy sending an email. It's like, oh, hey, I'm Joe, right? And like you can see me, you can hear my voice, you see me talking, you see me kind of going through a presentation to say, this is what I think, XYZ. And I think it's been way more valuable doing it that route. So I would say, if anything, I think we can all relate to this. Like, I hate email. I get like a million emails a day. And so, if you need to explain a complex topic in a short order, hopping on a video to me is infinitely faster than writing a 2-page email.
Yeah, and I guess to be clear, like, so a lot of what we're talking about is like one-to-one video. Like you're making these specifically for like one individual person, like at the company, right? And then also, are you doing stuff that's more broad, or I guess how do you split
Oh
that
yeah.
out? Like so you're doing stuff that just can be mass consumed. It's not specific to any one client. But then a lot of what we're talking
Mm-hmm.
about is I'm creating a video specifically for this individual client, their needs and the questions that they have.
Yeah, so I do both, right? So I've got a YouTube channel where I talk through, I mean, it sounds kind of dorky, but going back to where I think, hey, if I can teach somebody about a topic, I really understand it. And so it's kind of a forcing function for me, right? To sit in the background and go, okay, here's this concept. How do I kind of framework that out to explain it to anybody? Right. So if it's the new cyber war exclusions, right, coming out on cyber policies, as an example, I made a video about that. That was just kind of for the masses. There's often a lot of interplay between, say, like the individual videos and the kind of the generic, I shouldn't say generic, the broad audience videos, because I can talk to somebody and say, they'll have a question. Very often now, after I've made over 100 videos, I've already made a video on that exact question, right? So I'll say, here's the general answer, right? I'm going to give you like the 30,000 foot view answer to your question, but then I'll also send you the video that goes a little more in depth, right, into that particular topic. And so there's a lot of interplay there, but it's actually worked out very, very well.
Now, Joe, I can't let you out of here without giving sort of your beginner's guide crash course. Like, if you had to give like two pieces of valuable information, you already said a few, but if you really had to give pieces on getting started with this turned into a video conversation. I love it. I didn't expect it, but within
Mhm.
somebody getting started in this realm, like you said, nobody's going to hold your hand. There's a lot to figure out, but if you had to give them sort of your two most important shortcuts to sort of put them on the right path, what is that?
Find something you are truly interested in. Cyber insurance, tech, that's a lot of what I do these days. The majority of what I do. I was really just interested in that because of my tech background for years. And for the better part of a decade, nobody cared. But I just thought it was really cool and really interesting. And it just kind of like hit that button in my brain. And I thought it was really awesome. And so I would say, one, find something you're really interested in. Any line of insurance, it doesn't matter, right? Maybe you really like movies, right? And you're I think they're called cinephiles. Apologies if that's wrong, right? If you're a cinephile, go, man, there's got to be insurance for like movies, right? How does that work, right? And then just start going down that path and combine those two interests. And I feel like the beauty of that is you will find solutions faster than your peers can even identify problems, right? So it's only going to work to your benefit. Next, I would say just read everything you can, right? Once you find out that thing that you're interested in, right? It doesn't necessarily matter if there's like money in it per se. I mean, obviously, we all have to make a living and keep the lights on. But I think once you are just that guy, it's almost like you're not working anymore. You just get to help people and you get to talk about something that you just really love and enjoy. And I think the more people you help, the more money you'll make. And so, like, these opportunities will just come out of nowhere that you didn't even know existed and that you couldn't pay to get that opportunity. And people will just contact you. So I'd say find something you love and then just research the hell out of it, right? Just start asking questions. Read everything you possibly can. Get super nerdy. Start reading. One of my favorite books is Understanding Insurance Law. The sixth edition that came out is actually really quite good and a little bit easier to read than the fifth edition, right? So just start reading about this stuff and figure out, like, how does all this work together, right? Because insurance is just a big machine with a bunch of gears that operate together. That's all it really is. And so once you understand how all the cogs work together, then you can say, oh, well, this is why this exclusion exists, because that's a different type of insurance, which is this thing over here, right? And you build all this out and then just start teaching anybody you can about what you know in this like one little niche area, and you'll kill it, man. And you're going to make the world a better place, and you're going to make money doing it.
All right, Joe, I've got three more questions for you.
Sure.
And the first one is, what's one thing you hope you never forget?
Oh, where I came from. So I grew up with not a lot of money in a pretty terrible education system. Thank God I skipped a lot of school and I went to the library or the computer lab. That actually ironically turned out very much in my favor doing that. Yeah, I'd say never forgetting where I come from, right? It's like very much a driver, but also I think it kind of keeps everything in perspective where, something happens in business and it's like, oh my God. And then I think, well, the lights are on. I own my house. I got food on the table for my kids. Like, it's not that bad, right? Like, the world will continue to turn.
Now, I might be a little concerned to ask you this question, but on the other side of that, what's one thing you still have yet to learn?
I have a running list on my computer of probably 200 things by this point that I need to do more research into. Right now, I'd say I'm doing a lot of reading into something called interpleters, which I won't bore anybody to death with that one, but I think that'll be pretty interesting. I'm looking a lot more into like macroeconomics, something called blitz scaling, network effects businesses, because I think that's going to have a really big impact on my clients in the technology world, and kind of all this venture capital money pouring into the space, venture capital, private equity money. Private equity is like, it's like socialism, right? Like, it's cool until you run out of other people's money, to loosely quote Margaret Thatcher there. But that I think is going to have a profound impact on the technology space. And so I'm trying to dive a lot deeper into that. Yeah, that's just an example. But yeah, it's like hundreds of things I'm still trying to figure out.
All right, Joe. Last question to you, sir. If I were to hand you a magic wand of sorts to reshape, change, alter, speed up, really any part of insurance, what's that thing? Where is it going? And what's it doing?
I would make. All right, this is going to sound super nerdy. All right, but bear with me. I would make every insurance agent or broker take a basic statistics course, because one thing that has been driving me insane is, and if you're listening to this, please stop quoting all of those, data breach or ransomware reports out there if you don't know what the underlying data set is, because it just, one, it annoys me to death, but two, you're putting out information that's not particularly relevant or even viable. There's one company out there saying that, like, God, what was the nonsense they were putting out? 27% of cyber claims get denied. And I was like, what world do you live in where like over a quarter of cyber claims get denied? Because you'd have the insurance commissioners in the States like crucifying these cyber insurance companies, right? Maybe that's more of a, like, the tech folks are quoting this stuff because they don't really understand statistics either. But, don't put out there like, hey, the average cost of a breach is X, right? It's the average cost of a breach is X for this particular data set, which probably has absolutely no bearing or relevance on the people you're trying to help, right? So just dig into those studies and go, all right, who are the people that actually responded to these studies? Like, that's where you get those wacky, the average cost of a data breach is $3.86 million, right? We heard that for years. And it's like, well, yeah, if you're a multinational, multi-billion-dollar corporation that responded to that one study, but like, what does that have to do with the SMB down the street? Nothing, right? They're not going to shell out almost $4 million for a data breach. Like, that's preposterous, right? So that would be my super nerdy answer, is just a basic course on statistics to understand, hey, before you start spouting this stuff off, like, just, scroll to the bottom of the study and just start reading, like, okay, what industries were involved? How big were the businesses? What types of businesses were they, et cetera?
Joe, this has been fantastic, sir. I'm going to leave it right there.
Thanks, man. It's been good talking with you again.